evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are joining on. Edition, edition of our monthly podcast, Diaspora Dialogues. My name is Moses Ochonu, and I'll be the anchor for today. Osman Dagbo. Dr. Osman Dagbo is a physician, he's a man of many parts. In addition to being a physician, he's an author, he's an intellectual, he's a newspaper columnist, he's an all-around ideas person. And of course, he's a commentator, a prolific commentator on national affairs. He's a deep thinker and an inspirational person. My second colleague is Professor Farouk Berogi, who is a professor of journalism and emerging media at Kennesaw State University. Farouk Berogi needs no introduction. He is a nationally visible newspaper columnist, happy DIG Frank Emeka Mba, whom I shall introduce shortly. He needs no elaborate introduction. He's very visible in the national security and policing space. And I would say that he is one of the foremost, if not the foremost, Nigerian authority on matters regarding policing and national security. But I will do a more formal introduction of him shortly. Today, we are discussing the topic of state police. It is a topic that is raging as we speak. It is a topic in which every Nigerian should be interested because it could either solve our ongoing insecurity problem or complicate it. As we speak, this conversation, first of all, is necessitated by something that is happening as we speak, which is that we have a bill that is making its way through the National Assembly. You could say that the bill is a knee-jerk reaction to the worsening insecurity, and that the product of desperation on the part of government. But whatever is the case, it's something that has been in the national conversation for the last couple of years, as Nigeria has been mitigate and end the current security crisis. But the last Thursday, today is Saturday, so 2 days ago precisely, the House of Reps actually passed the bill. They stepped down their own bill and considered the bill that was sent to them by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and duly passed. The Senate on its due to take the bill in the next few days, and it is expected that in the next week or so, the two chambers of our National Assembly will come together and harmonize those two bills and send the final version to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for his signature. So things are happening very fast. Things are happening at a very fast pace, and it is almost difficult, if not impossible, to keep up. So this conversation is happening in an urgent national atmosphere where we need to dissect what's happening. We don't yet know what's in the bill. We can only speculate what the bill contains. I haven't read it, maybe others have, but we can talk about that later. But so this conversation is happening at a time when this bill is being crafted, and presumably the National Assembly is looking for ideas and input as we speak. So it is a conversation that will have national ramifications, that will have implications for the bill that is currently under consideration in the National Assembly. So it is a critically important national conversation to have on this day. So, state police has generated a lot of debates in Nigeria, and the debate has focused on several items. One issue in the debate is the cost. How much will it cost to set up these state police forces in the various states, 36 states, and maybe the FCT? How much will it cost? Where will the money come from? Once established, would state police units be well funded? Without adequate funding, how can they be effective against crime, against insecurity, against kidnapping, against terrorism? Would this state police units be another avenue for politicians at the subnational level, especially governors, to siphon funds? Would it become another cesspool, another opportunity, another pipeline to say it crudely, to steal government money? Another question that has come up with regards to the funding is the issue of security votes. We all know that currently state governors get what is called under our constitution the security votes. There has been, for many years now, there's been criticism as to what the governors are doing with this money. How can we have governors controlling billions of naira in security votes, so much insecurity, and so much crime on our hands? The question is the setting up, even if the units, how security votes that governors even for having job. Happy our to back, which he's I believe in Ogun State, so maybe he can speak directly to this issue of the security vote, because my understanding is that state governors have to somehow work with respective police commissioners to disburse and to utilize the security vote. Another issue that has come up in the debate on state policing in Nigeria as the conversation continues is the question of potential abuse of these police units by state governors. Since the state governor under the bill that is currently under consideration, what is being imagined and might be passed into law is that the governors would now become, in not just in symbolic terms, but in actual terms, the chief security officers of their various states. In other words, they will be in control of units to be established under the current proposal. What will stop them from abusing and from using these police units against their opponents, against their enemies, against their critics? And what kinds of safeguards can we put in place, either in the bill or in terms of maybe constitutional amendments or other instruments, to hold them in check, to hold the governors in check, to keep them from abusing this police unit? That's one question that has always also come up. Another question that has come up in the debate on state police is the question of jurisdiction. What will be the scope of these police units that will be set up in the states? Territorially, would their activities be confined to the boundaries of their respective states? Can states, for instance, establish their own intelligence units to support the work of their state police forces? Can they establish their own independent, autonomous investigative apparatuses to complement the work of their state police forces? Those are just open-ended questions that have come up in the conversation and debate on state policing. Another question that has come up is the question of overlap between the responsibilities of federal law enforcement, that is the national police, the NDLEA, the National Civil Defense Forces, and other national security agencies. What would be how can we define the various responsibilities? How can we keep state polices from overlapping on their territories? Also, at the same time, how can we foster cooperation between these different agencies at the national level and at the state level? What will be the nature of synergies between them? Those are questions that have also come up. What kind of weaponry would they be allowed to possess? Military-grade weapons? What would be the limits on arming them? Would the state governors be allowed to arm their police units in manners that would make them rivals or would make them equivalents of the Nigerian Army or other security agencies? What kind of training would they receive, and where would they receive the training? In the federal police training academies and schools in places like Kano and other places? Or will they be allowed to set up their own training academies? Those are also questions that are begging for answers. For instance, another question is, if we are going this route of establishing state police units, will state governors and state governments be allowed to request or procure or to pursue foreign training for their police units, for instance? Will they be allowed to go into partnership or to procure equipment from foreign governments and foreign countries to support the work of these police units? There might be cases of multi-state criminal and terrorist networks. How would police units across different states work together to solve crimes that cross state boundaries, to deal with criminal networks and terrorist networks that are not confined to one state, but that operate in multiple states simultaneously? Like I said, we haven't seen the text of this bill that has been passed by the House of Reps and that will soon be taken up by the Senate. So a lot of these questions are speculative in nature, but you can see why Nigerians are posing these questions, because these questions, these speculations, are expressions of the fears, the anxieties, and the uncertainties that Nigerians harbor when the word state policing is mentioned. There's a lot of mystery surrounding it, a lot of uncertainty. No one knows what it would look like, what state police units would do, whether they'll be effective or not. And so there's a lot of speculation, there are a lot of questions, there are a lot of fears and anxieties being expressed. So I live in the United States. So one of the things that have come up for me when state policing has been discussed in Nigeria is the question of, well, are there examples out there that Nigeria can look up to? Are there actual examples of state policing that maybe we can copy or adapt to our system in Nigeria? And for me, as a resident of the United States, I think of the US model, where you have, you have the equivalent of what we are now talking about in terms of state policing. We have the federal marshals. So the US operates a multi-layered policing framework or system, where you have the federal marshals, and then at the state level, you have the state troopers, and then you have the county police units, or sheriffs, as they call them in some. And then finally, you have the city police. So you have 4 different layers. And then, of course, the prominent national investigative body, which is the FBI. So at any given period, you are going to, you have, when you're dealing with questions of crime and insecurity and terrorism and those kinds of questions, you have multiple police units working separately and independently to solve crime and to deal with questions of insecurity. And in the US, the state police, from what I understand, they are almost fully autonomous. They are funded by the state, by their various states. They're in charge of enforcing state law, not federal law, in their states. They deal with crimes committed within the state boundaries, within these boundaries of their states. However, they can seek advanced investigative and other resources from the federal marshals and the FBI when a particular crime tasks their resources and they can't muster enough resources to do. They can always call upon the federal marshals to assist them. So you have in the US a complementary role between the various policing units, the national and the subnational. They complement their roles. And then you have the National Guard as well, which is a paramilitary or military unit that sometimes in emergencies can be called upon, or when the police forces of the various states are overwhelmed, the city police are overwhelmed, you can call upon the National Guard to assist as well. And governors are in charge of those units as well and can mobilize them for operations. And then you have federal law enforcement. Whenever criminal networks commit crimes across state boundaries, then the federal police units get involved. So I want to, so for me, the US is a model, but also the US model is a bit complicated and sophisticated. So the question remains, is it a model? Can we pick a few things from it and adapt it to our environment? Can we come up with something entirely new? Because the US is the only country that comes to mind when I think about decentralized policing, and I think policing. So I'll leave it here for now, and then I'll go on now to properly introduce our guest, and then pose some questions to him. So Frank Kumba, our guest, PhD, or Dr. Frank Kumba, PhD, MNI, is a retired Deputy Inspector General of Police. He is a lawyer, and he is a security scholar. Like I said, he is one of Nigeria's foremost authorities on matters of policing and security. He joined the Nigerian Police Force in 1992 as a cadet inspector and emerged as the best graduating student, or best graduating cadet rather, police in Wudil, Kano. I can add Wudil to it because I know that town. This was in 1993. Mba went on to study law and obtained an LLB and was called to the bar in 2002. He subsequently earned an LLM from the University of Dundee. He completed a doctorate in security and peace studies at the University of Ibadan, hence the PhD affixed to his name. Dr. Mba graduated from the FBI National Academy in Quantico in Virginia, and also attended and graduated from a program in national and internal security at Harvard University in Boston, United States. He attended another strategic leadership training at the University of Oxford in England. Dr. Mba is a member of the National Institute, having completed the senior executive course at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies in Kuru. Dr. Mba became nationally prominent through his work in police public relations. He served first as spokesperson for the Lagos State Police Command, and then went on to have 2 stints as Force Public Relations Officer at the national level. Between 2012 and 2014, that was his first stint, and his second stint in that role was between 2019 and 2022. Dr. Mba was police area commander in Festac and Ajah in Lagos. He was a senior investigator at the State Criminal Investigation Department in T. He was the officer at the fraud unit. And like I said earlier on, he was the commissioner of police in Ogun State. From that position, he moved on to become commissioner of police in charge of the Border Patrol Force. He was then promoted to the rank of Assistant Inspector General of Police and oversaw the Force Criminal Investigation Department Annex at Alagbon in Lagos. He was then promoted after that to the rank of Deputy Inspector General of Police and given the responsibility of heading the research and planning and later training and development units, respectively. Dr. Mba also served with the Nigerian police contingent in the United Nations missions in Liberia from 2006, a UN medal for his service. That Dr. Mba retired from the Nigerian police in this year after 30 service, in the force. Dr. Sir?
Prof.
So, the our show is to talk a question for you. It work? Can it work? It's a simple question, but it's also a profound question. It's a question that we are asking. To be sure, a lot of Nigerians, the new way to have it's broken, or at least that is the way that it appears to us, non-professionals, those of us who are outside the security sector. It appears that policing has broken its dysfunction. A new way, they are open to a new model. But their question is, can it work? Because it's new. We haven't tried it before. So from your perspective, sir, as a security expert, as a legal practitioner who is conversant with the legal aspect, with the constitutional dimension of the problem, with the law enforcement dimension of the problem, you are an all-rounder. You know all the ramifications of the issue. Can this model that has not been tried before in Nigeria work in Nigeria to help us overcome the insecurity problem that we are facing, sir? That is the question that I want to start with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And for those of us who tuned in.
Before you start, I forgot to say something, if I may interrupt you briefly, because our viewers may be wondering why we have not been joined by our friend and colleague, Farouk Berugi, Professor Berugi. Professor Berugi unavoidably has to be absent because as we speak, he's in the air. His flight was delayed. He and his wife were in Brazil for a couple of weeks, and they were supposed to travel back to the United States yesterday. And unfortunately, these things are out of our control. Their flights were delayed. So that's why he's not here with us. He sends his apologies, sir. So please, sorry for the interruption.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. And like I say, thank you for having me. And a very good evening to those joining us from Nigeria, and for those joining us from other parts of the world. I would say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Already before even you threw the question, you had raised a lot of issues, looking at what you consider as what I can describe as a potential risk and challenges in implementing state police in Nigeria, or decentralized policing system in Nigeria. You've mentioned cost, funding, so many things, issues of jurisdiction. But in answering your question, I'll start by saying that a decentralized policing system can work in Nigeria. It can, but it can only work if we're able to identify the potential risks and then take measures to ameliorate them, take measures to cure those potential risks or those potential challenges that may come up. And before I delve into details, I also want to say that if research in the field of policing, comparative policing, shows that there is actually policing that is inherently better than the other. There is none. There is none. Whether you are dealing with the centralized policing system or the decentralized policing system, there's no empirical evidence to show that the decentralized policing system is actually better than the centralized policing system, and vice versa. Just as Nigeria is trying to move away from the centralized policing system to the decentralized policing system, we've also seen countries that actually moved away from decentralized policing system to a centralized policing system. For instance, in 2013, in Scotland, the Scottish authorities actually moved away from a decentralized system by merging its 8 police regions into one. So they clearly moved away from a decentralized system into a centralized system. And so far, it is working for them. The same thing happened same year in Netherlands, where the 25 different police regions were merged into one central command. And if you look at these economies, whether in terms of crime rates, in terms of respect for human rights, in terms of their defense and protection of democracy, if you look at every other human development index, they are doing very well. So I just want to make this because I consider this a universal truism, and we need to take note of it. And that's why we need to tread carefully when people just try to have a binary argument, or when people, and that's why I like the fact that you use the word knee-jerk approach. It seems every time we are pressured, we just think that once we decentralize the policing system, we will be better off. Yes, we could be better off, but then we must identify where are those areas where our centralized system failed us. And then we must take measures to cure those defects so we don't end up replicating the failure of the NPF at the subnational levels. If we do that, then we'll be faced with a very monstrous problem. It will even be worse than where we are today. But if we can identify those challenges that militated the effective performance of the centralized policing system, and while we're decentralizing, we're able to fix them, then we could be better off. I think I needed to make this point and then go ahead. And again, are Nigerians actually justified calling for the decentralization of the police? We have very good, Nigerians have very good on and else. And so factors driving this call. Increase security in the police academy. Not talk about terrorism. The cost took kidnapping may around that person. You boyfriend for some is high, automatically the trust deficit or quotient for its law enforcement agencies, particularly the primary law enforcement agency, the police, will also be very high. So trust is a major issue. And we saw that clearly during the NSAS protest. Then we also have the issue of persistent complaints by state governors who are complaining about not having sufficient control over the federal police. Again, for me, this is neither here nor there, because in advanced democracies, the governors will not be asking for control in the way we are defining it over the state police, because it depends on what the control is for. If the control is for the advancement of the common good, fine. But if the control is for the advancement of narrow political and economic interest, then it becomes a problem. And that's why for state police to work effectively, we must have an appropriate legal and constitutional framework that clearly delineates authority. Again, the other factors driving the call for state police, for me, is what I would call political rightness. Today, we have a president who is overtly in support of state policing. There have been pretense about it. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu have never made pretense about his support for state policing. He has been an apostle of the devolution of powers to the subnationals. And so this political ripeness is actually the biggest factor for me. In fact, there are two big factors: the growing crime rates, the growing insecurity, and then political ripeness. Because if the president has not come out openly to support it, no matter the noise from the streets, we wouldn't be moving at the speed we are moving to support state police. And of course, the appeal to federalism. A lot of citizens believe that since we operate in a federal system of government, states should be allowed to also operate their own policing. But for me, one of the reasons why I've supported state police is de facto we actually have a semblance of state policing in Nigeria. The proliferation of all kinds of informal security outfits created by the states. In Lagos, you have LATSMA, you have the neighborhood watch. Among almost all the states in the southwestern part of the country, you have Amateku. In the north, you have the Hisba. In the southeast, you have Ibubagu, Homeland Security outfits, and everywhere. And I tell myself, as a former police officer and a practicing security person, it is better to have a former state police than allow this riotous mob to be patrolling our streets. So let's formalize it. Let's have structures. Let's know the colors. Let's have rules. And that, for me, is one of the reasons why I'm supporting state police. I also believe that if we put the necessary things in place, and I'll be coming to that shortly, what are those things we need to put in place? We'll be able to deal with some of those risks. And in your opening salvo, you've actually identified some of those risks. You went through them probably in no fixed order, but you were able to deal with them. And if I should speak to some of the things you spoke, because I jotted them down, I can compartmentalize them into different subheads. You spoke about cost, funding. These two, for me, will come under the economic risk of establishing state police. And so, under the economic risk, we need to be sure of what we are going into, because policing is an expensive venture. Are the state government adequately primed to fund the establishment of state police? Because you have to talk of recruitment, you have to talk of training, you have to talk of uniforms, you have to talk of probably building new institutions, tools, expenditure. You need to be ready to deal with that. And these are the economic risks. And if this is not managed properly, we begin to have uneven policing in Nigeria. And what do I mean? The richer states like Lagos Rivers, Delta, perhaps Anambra, Kano to some extent. Some of these richer states, Akwa Ibom, might be able to fund their own state policing apparatus. Able to fund, and the other states begin to suffer policing on equality in policing, and that problem because it may cause displacement of criminals. You need to have crime dispersals from the to less of and in police services. You spoke about the risk used by governors or by the big men in the polity, the ruling party, and the rest of them. That for me will come under political risk. And so there could be risk of state capture. Governors might want to hijack those state policing apparatus. They could be used to suppress dissent, opposition. And we have seen that a lot of the states in the country today have weak legislative oversights. So even if you expect the state houses of assembly to provide legislative oversight on those state policing structures, that might be difficult. And so these are some of the risks. And as we identify these risks, we craft our laws under our national oversight to be able to suppress these mischiefs that we're identifying. You spoke about jurisdiction of state police. How do we identify them? Overlap between the state police and the federal police and other agencies. This for me will come under operational risk. So under operational risk, you'll be dealing with issues like this. How do you define this jurisdiction? And jurisdiction is not just about geography. Jurisdiction also who deals with which crime. Okay. So, and you also touch that. So when we have transboundary crime, who takes charge? When you have organized crimes at large scale organized crimes, banditry and mass kidnappings that happens in Nigeria today are certainly not just local crimes anymore. Sometimes when these criminals are taken, when these criminals take victims in Kogi, for instance, they can go all the way. They can take them all the way to Benue, all the way to Nasarawa, all the way to Niger. So you will need cross-jurisdictional collaboration and interface to be able to deal with that. But I would say that is why, whether we are decentralizing or remaining centralized, the federal police must continue to be attended to, because you need a very strong federal police to continue to support the state police. In fact, if you weaken the federal police because you are decentralizing, what you simply do is to make the state police vulnerable, because when they are overwhelmed, when they are challenged, their first support ordinarily should come from the federal police. So even as we are trying to decentralize, we still need to have a very strong, well-funded federal police to continue to promote for the state police. You also talk about training, when, how, and this is an issue. And we also have social ethnic profile of minorities. How do this they do not debate our fault lines? How do we manage as and so if we're able to identify these political risks, operational risks, social risks, economic risk, and we're able to customize our implementation strategies to deal with some of these risks, we're home and dry. So for me, I would say state police can work, but we must be able to deal with some of these challenges. We must be able to come up with a framework, a constitutional, regulatory, and statutory framework that identifies and deals with these risks, a national oversight mechanism that is able to provide some level of supervision to ensure the presence of the we are creating in actively to do this thing, to do including recurrent process. Again, I can't emphasize, I can't stop emphasizing this. Recently, you saw a video of a police officer who made some ethnic slurs and threatened somebody from other parts of threatened. Okay, let me not talk about that. But the point I'm trying to make is that our recruitment process must be inclusive. Just imagine if you go to Enugu State, where I come from, for example, and in some parts of Enugu, there's a strong presence of Northerners. The Gariki area, for example, and you have a state policing outfit there, and where the 100% indigenous as staff of the state police, you run into problem. So it means that if a non-Igbo person has a problem, the moment he walks into that police station, he believes he won't get justice. And indeed, he might not get justice. If you go to Lagos, Kano, every other part. And unfortunately, our recruitment policy, our employment policy in Nigeria is structured in such a way that your certificate of origin is like having a PhD of its own. So every time you want to get employed, one of the first things you are asked to produce is your certificate of origin. So if we replicate that recruitment policy or strategy in the employment of officers into the state policing services, we're going to run into problems. So my suggestion would be that there must be diversity, and residency must be taken into account in recruitment into the state policing services. Otherwise, you will have a state police service where other ethnic groups, minorities, or religious group who are minorities feel right from the beginning that their rights cannot be protected. And so as long as we're able to put some of these things, and I'll be touching them as we go. And most importantly, again, Policing is not just about the number of boots you have on ground. There are social, economic, and cultural factors that drive crimes. No matter the number of policemen you're able to recruit, whether you centralize or you decentralize, if you're not able to deal with those socio-economic factors, unemployment, out of school children, political exclusion, economic exclusion, if you're unable to deal with these socio-economic and political factors that are driving crimes, the best the police services could do or can do will be to tackle the symptoms of the crimes. They might be able to suppress crimes temporarily, but they will resurface. So while we are trying to reform our police, we should also improve our governance system. We should also be looking at our judicial system. How do we also reform the judicial system? How do we also now ensure that these reforms we are trying to undertake within the policing ecosystem, a similar thing is also done within the judiciary. So if we're able to deal with all these, we're good to go.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mba, for this wide-ranging response. Very, very insightful. Some of the things you touched on, I hadn't even thought about at all. But you forced me, or you compelled me to consider a lot of these issues that I had not at all thought about, and that are of critical importance to this conversation on state policing. So thank you for that excellent set of responses. I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Osman Dagbo, shortly. But one of the things I want to ask is just a short, simple questions. And, if we could, because you touched on something that I thought, the reason why Nigerians are clamoring for state policing is precisely as you said, because they consider that the current centralized model of policing in Nigeria broken. They consider it flawed. They see a lot of problems with it. And you sort of echoed that by saying that there are failures, that the federal policing model has several failures. Could you touch on some of those inadequacies and failures, and so that we can also, as things that should be avoided and not replicate as we move towards state policing, essentially are the problems that we have with our current federal policing system? And that could be just a set of short answers, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Agbo.
Yeah, I actually don't want to. I actually don't want to sound like the police spokesperson here. But the truth really is, a lot of the failures that the Nigerian police, the central police system has suffered, are actually a creation of the society. Honestly, they are a creation of the system. And that's why oftentimes when you find police officers from Nigeria participating in the United Nations peacekeeping or other international assignments where they are appropriately resourced, they enjoy the job they do there, and they always come out in flying colors. But as long as they continue to operate under the system they're operating today, with poor remuneration, a living quarters that are just like where animals live, no tools to work with, Sometimes a DPO or an area commander is left to fend for himself, relying
Wow.
on the goodwill of people, members of the members of the business community and politicians to be able to function effectively,
Wow.
vehicles
Wow.
that are not maintained,
Wow.
lack of adequate working tools.
Hmm.
Some police stations are still using the old typewriters. As long as we refuse to resource our police, as long as we refuse to pay them
Hmm.
living wages, as long as we refuse to provide adequate working tools, communication,
Yeah.
mobility, technology, as long as we refuse to do these things, they will continue to turn in the kind of poor results they are turning in for us. As a matter of fact, Robert Francis Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, said it many years ago that every society gets the type of criminals it deserves. Then he went on to say that it is also true that every community gets the type of law enforcement it insists on. When he made this statement, he was not just talking about accountability, members of the society demanding accountability, but he was trying to make the point that policing is a contractual relationship between the government, the people, and then the people who are executing the contract. He's trying to make the point that for any police agency to succeed, it needs the support of the people, the support of the government. So, and that's why we keep emphasizing that as we we must be careful not to replicate the failure of the federal police. The inadvertent federal police is six new state police, state service still continuing the old system, not providing them with uniforms, compelling them to source some of their uniform themselves, not paying them living wages, not resourcing them adequately in terms of their working tools, in terms of technology, in terms of everything they need to succeed. What you simply do at the central level, at the national level, at the subnational level. So these are the biggest challenges. As long as the police is unable to, as
Please
long
bear with
as the
us.
government and are unable adequately to be able to perform, they won't.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Of a picture that circulated a few months back. A picture of, I believe, from Lagos State. It was just, to be honest, to come. You know, you wouldn't, I hate to, this is not an exaggeration. You know, the wouldn't do that I saw. I know about the poor remuneration and other things. I was recently talking to somebody, and the person informed me that state police commands in Nigeria don't have a crime that processes evidence of crimes, something as basic as that. So I'm glad that you went into those details because you are right, sir, that if we If we move to decentralized policing and somehow the state police units simply replicate these failures, then we are doomed. With that said, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Agbo. Dr. Can see he's working, so we appreciate his sacrifice. He's in his work gear. As a doctor, he's actually on duty, but he's joining us. I'm sure he has a few things to say. Please take it away, Dr. Agbo. You are muted, sir. You're muted. So,
Okay. Yeah,
okay,
thank you so
there you go.
much, Mo. And I have to say that we appreciate you so much for holding it down, even when Farouk and I are, not able to participate fully in the program of today. And it's obviously something we've all been looking out for, because this is a very, very topical issue that we're talking about. And let me also join you in thanking for making our time to be with us. If you remember, this was supposed to have taken place last week, but because of some conflicting schedule that DIG had, and how important we see this, we had to move it just to make sure that it happens. So, Dr. Mba, we thank you so much. I'm sure you don't know, but we actually share a lot of things in common in Enugu State, but we're also from Udenu local government. And not just that we're from the same local government, we're actually neighbors. So you're from Ezimo and I'm from Imilike. So each time I go home, I have to cross your place before I get to mine. And like they say, your reputation has preceded you. Even before we talked about this, I've heard so much about you. And we're also proud that, the kind of representation you've given to our people. So thank you so much. On that note, this issue of is so something that is you know another a lot of, because we important. Yeah, the country has been actually run by a garden variety of criminals. Have it here in Nigeria. Somebody like me, so for have a very long empathy for this, for reasons of some of which you guys have mentioned. You have a group of people who are supposedly entrusted in going after criminals and keeping us safe, yet we fail them in every conceivable ways. We talked about not even having a living wage, but it's even worse than that, because police officers, especially those of basically beggars on the road. And so when you have a situations like that, of course, you're not going to expect the best. And the fact that the way go contingents to other African countries, they get honorary mentions and everybody's applauding, their professionalism. That tells you that the problem is actually from the environment that brought them. And when you say that, like they say that, every group of people, the kind of leadership, they get the kind of leadership they deserve. The same thing, kind of policing, every society gets the kind of policing you deserve. Now, but I have to say that, even with all those, there are also some own goals by the police. There are some inflicted fear of the officers, you, in the midst of rage in Nigeria, police. How the southeast from where we come, because in the southeast, we basically most people see police as more as an occupation force than a group of people that have to protect them. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of the complaints, uh, especially given that every few kilometers, if you're driving in any of the states in the southeast, every few kilometers that you traverse, you will meet a police officer. And it's basically an extortion scheme. It's not like they are there basically to protect you. You could see that they are, if you carry AK-47, they're really more interested in, trying to get you to part with whatever you have, I raise that because this, even though it might happen in some other parts of Nigeria, but this is a particular problem that everybody knows about the Southeast. We've had other places that it were, and it has gotten so bad that even from what we hear, senior police officers lobby to be posted to the Southeast because it's almost like a money minting machine for them. And the reason why I'm raising this is because it has everything to do with this state policing we're talking about. Because a lot of our people believe that a big part of the reason is when you send somebody who has no ties, both religiously, custom, and all have you, when you send them to a place, it's very difficult for you to, get to that level where they feel like they feel that indebtedness to be able to do what they should do. That is protect life and properties. When I say that when you place it alongside somebody who is actually born from the place, because if the situation were to be turned around where the folks who are involved are folks who are known on the ground, they're from the same area, it will be difficult for you to day in, day out extort money from people without expecting consequences. Because then in this situation, they'll know where you live, they know your parents, they actually know where they can hurt you. You can't say that if it is somebody from Kano that you have no idea where they come from. And so these are some of the arguments that many people are making in support of state policing. Now, I don't think anybody has the illusion that all of a sudden Nigeria becomes an El Dorado when we start implementing state policing. But some of the issues raised, i.e., that the governors that they're going to just hijack the whole apparatus and make them a personal army. And the question is it not happening now, even before, even within the federal structure? You find out that most of the time when the state governors complain about, oh, I am not, the instrument of police, the leadership of the police is controlled by the federal government. They only say that when it comes in terms of taking responsibilities. But when it comes to hunting down their political opponents or even going after, people who write things against them, then you find out that they can always get the police to do that. So what I'm trying to say is that some of the things that we're already complaining, it obtains even in the federal structure. So I don't see how that is going to be so different if, seeing it as a disadvantage of why we shouldn't have this. Now, I believe that at this point, what we have, the arrangement we have now is just giving them plausible deniability to say, oh, we are not in control. And then I don't know if you guys had the opportunity to watch some of the videos that's come out in the past few weeks about some youth leader in Borno State giving testimonies about the attempt they made at trying to free about 400 people who were abducted and kidnapped by the one terrorist organization. And he made it very clear, he mentioned some names, which of course I'm not going to mention here, but he made it very clear that, it looks like there is this unwritten path between some politicians and state government, you trying to use insecurity to extort money from the federal government. And he went into extra length, and that to just tell you some of the ills that is with having a federal arrangement. Because if now the governors don't know that, okay, they are they are the one in charge of policing, then you find out that they will have to do everything possible to make sure that they secure life and property. Because now they know that if something happens, they're not going to hide behind the fact that it's the federal government And then, they now have to they'll be forced to take some responsibilities. So those are some of the things that some of us see as, the reason why this issue, this matter of state policing is something that needs to be given a serious consideration. Now, having said that, of course, we know there are a lot of other factors to be considered. One of the biggest issue I'm seeing in this is that the whole issue, whether it's drafting the laws and passing it, has been very, very opaque. Because we can all understand that there will be so many moving parts, and you guys did mention some of them, which includes, how is it going to operate alongside the federal structure? And I say that because we know that one big issue is always, that division of responsibilities between the federal and the state. And when you have something as serious as those who hold instrument of coercion, then you know how sensitive it is, because the federal government, if you're president and you know that the governor has the police in their control, you know that the powerful state is actually so very, very sensitive area. So the which is why I believe that they should have, just like some where break them into groups, go to states, have people debate. In that way, people will get to actually know what is inside the document that is going to finally produce the functionality of the state police. We're not seeing any of those ones. So you just have a government that's been in for like 2 getting to 3 years, and within that time frame, they have always come out with a document that even has passed the lower house and is now headed to the upper chambers, and then later for presidential accent. So I feel like they should have given it more time for people to know actually what is contained therein. In that way, we can make some informed criticism. But as at now, I'm not sure how many people who know the provisions within the documents that they are arguing. So I just wanted to make some of these observations, and I'm not going to hold you so much. I will turn it over to Mo so that he will give some of us, since this is an audience participatory program, to give our audience some time to ask few questions before anything else. And then I can always cycle back. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Abdul. But I thought it would be appropriate to also give Dr. Mba maybe a chance to respond to some of the things you said. I personally picked a few important nuggets. I'm sure he
Sure.
did as well, in terms of especially one of the issues you raised that seems to provide a counterpoint to the point he was making about the diversity of recruitment. But you came with something of a counterpoint that for credibility and legitimacy, especially when you have a trust deficit and suspicion regarding the police, maybe recruiting people who know the local area, who are from the local area, who are familiar with the culture, might foster greater trust and greater effectiveness, and maybe reduce some of the suspicion and tension that has marked policing, especially in the Southeast. So I thought that was a very critical point. Maybe Dr. Mba, if you want to respond to maybe some of the points that Dr. Agbo made, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Agbo. I think I'm lucky. I am sandwiched between people who are all who have filial relationships with me here, and because the little reading I also did about Prof is that he's also from Benue State. He's an Idoma, and that's my maternal home as well. And then, while Doctor is not just from my state, but just the next door neighbor. So I'm in safe hands, and it's good to feel that sense of safety here. Okay, so he spoke, he touched quite a lot of things, and I want to thank him for his for his comments. But when it comes to recruitment, I still think we need to be very careful. When I spoke about inclusive recruitment, I wasn't denying the fact that I wasn't saying that we should have state policing structures or the recruitment strategy should be like the federal police structure. No, absolutely no. But there are some states that are very cosmopolitan. And I'll mention Lagos, for example, where you have a huge presence of other ethnic nationalities. You also find that in so many other states. Just imagine having that kind of policing service, and you want to say that only the indigenes and indigenes only will be recruited. You'll be creating a monster from day one. And so, but that does not mean that the non-indigenes should become the majority. All you need to do is to look at the proportionate, look at look at the population spread. So if you can then decide to spice it up. Every policing agency in the world try to achieve a certain minimum level of diversity. And that's why when you go to Canada, for example, there are some cities in Canada make conscious efforts to recruit Blacks. In the United States, the same thing. In England, the same thing. In fact, in some parts of Europe, there are conscious efforts to even recruit persons of Arabic background. Otherwise, the day you arrest somebody who has those kind of background, you even run into problem with interpretation if the person doesn't speak your language, the dominant language effectively. So, for me, these are land that we need to work carefully. Let me tell you a story. The time Anna state problem, what hardly of Imo State. And suddenly, I think that happened when Rocha Sokorocha was the governor, and then Theodore Ojo was the governor of Abia. Somebody woke up one day in one of the states and just decided to tell everybody. I don't know who fired the first shot. But let's say, for example, Imo State government woke up and said all Abia indigenes who have been working in Imo should go. You know, during the creation of that state, they inherited because they were heated to one single working in Abia. And then suddenly a government policy came and said everybody in state A return. And then the other governor retaliated. And it created some tension between them. I followed up that story up to a certain point before I didn't know how they resolved that. But remember, Imo and Abia are majorly homogeneous. Homogeneous in terms of culture, in terms of language, in terms of religion. But yet they have. So I'm making. So the point is more in major incidents also play a role. You, an Idoma man, having problem, maybe you yourself like at Bado. And after delivering your lecture, you in this town, problem. And you walk to the station, and probably you don't even speak. And 101% of every police officer there is Yoruba, when probably there's a substantial population host Hausa, other so that's just me speaking about what I think is a potential problem. But that doesn't mean that in Ibadan, we expect that other ethnic groups will be the majority. No, because the majority, the major ethnic nationality is Yoruba. So probably I expect them to be the dominant number. But I also expect that you could once in a while stumble into an officer who is not Yoruba, gives you that safety, that sense of that sense of fairness, that perception that you will find justice there. And so I still strongly believe that these are some of the things that we should be looking at as we over here. It's an ongoing conversation. Yes, he said something that I totally align myself with. The speed with which the reforms are being carried out. And that is one of the reasons even a that probably they want to conclude this very quickly before the election. But as a professional, I have tried to tell people that that you know that can be true. Even passing these laws and all the regulatory work and the rest of them, it will still take time for you to recruit, train, equip, set up. So I don't in any way see the state police apparatus coming on stream before the 2027 election. That's me speaking now. The time the trust police at this level recruit the men and generally or you employ now another wonder if we do every part of the country, every citizen. So you need to do more of explanation from my vantage position. The very strong is secretary and not to get policies trying to craft a modern behind the scene. We've also thought of and I think this is where I will stop as we wait for other questions for me.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mba. As you were speaking, I was reminded of this this mantra, something about the measure of a responsible society is how that society treats its weak, its disenfranchised, and its disabled, and finally, and crucially, its minorities. Usually, it is minorities in a society to be reassured that they belong, that they are. So the issue that is quite important, it is the minority parts, not that to them. I was thinking about I leave conversation around the police begins to look like them, totally like them. So they begin to see themselves, the police. They begin to see people who look like them as police officers, going into their communities and talking to them, and so that they can feel, they can relax more with the police. They can deal with the police. Been a lot of in several departments across the US to try to recruit minorities, especially because this community, the distrust of the police. And so, as we talk about state police in Nigeria, I think that's critical. Not cultural, and I think multicultural people, different things across every part of. Like you rightly said, representation matters. When people see themselves represented in an institution, they tend to trust it more with. To
Let us ask quickly, minority in terms of uh, in terms of your ethnic nationality, we should also be talking about women, because my last one in the Nigerian police force before I retired was for women. In the south of the country, particularly southeast and south, in the southern part of the country, particularly southeast and south, we had so many men. That in some more women seeking to join police than the men, particularly in the southeast, where the young rather join this and dream big of becoming owners of housing, tribe, nature, and and aspects of the country. And in the southeast, into justice. So sometimes at the end of the recruitment process, we find uneven numbers and we're looking for men where we begin to scratch and scramble to get men to fill the positions. But in other parts of the country, up north, not in the middle, not in the north central, in the core north of northeast and northwest, we struggle to find women. And these are some of the issues that will play out when you establish state police. Because at the end of the day, incidentally, it is in those cultures that you have women. Because in those cultures, access to women is usually highly restricted because of cultural and religious factors. So you need to set representation of women to be able to police the population. And so this representative recruitment policy is something that we just need to really pay attention to the best of my knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mba. So now we turn it over to audience. They always have questions and comments to make. They're very engaging. So we'll turn it over to the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll give you, if you are with us here. If you are following us on Facebook or other social media, please also, you can put your question in the chat, or you can, indicate by raising your hand, digitally speaking, and then we'll call upon you to speak. If you have any questions for Dr. Mba or any comments to make, now is the time to do that. I see a question here. Let me see here. I see a question here already, but just indicate, let us know. My question is, there's a question from it says, my question is, if the state police formations receive improved welfare and better working equipment, and yet this is not replicated at the federal level, how do you juxtapose this scenario? I think this goes back to a point that you made earlier on, Dr. Mba, about not allowing state police to overshadow the federal police, but also to actually even strengthen in this new climate of decentralized policing. The point you made was that we need to strengthen the federal police even more. But that's a question that this audience member is asking. I don't know if you want to add anything to your earlier comment on it.
Yes, I mean, okay, so that it could lead to a couple of things. If the state police is better remunerated, better trained, better equipped, well, it will, I believe, ceteris paribus, all things being equal, it will impact positively on the security of that state. It could also lead to a reverse of members of the federal police who are from that state may also begin to seek to be engaged by their own, by the state police of their own state of origin. So we may begin to see a brain drain from the federal police to the state police. Because if I'm a member of the federal police and I'm from Enugu, and then my state is better organized and job satisfaction, I might do a job switch. I might do transfer of service. And I know with what the NGF is working with, that's the kind of thing that may be allowed for the initial years. So I might decide to do a transfer of service and move. So the federal police might begin to suffer a steady or gradual brain drain down to the local level. The challenge will be other of the displacement of crimes is less late. But the problem will be that there could be moments of national emergency. It could be a natural disaster, like flood, like whatever, that may overwhelm the the sophisticated policing unit at that state level. It could also be a huge crime situation, a big organized crime, where ordinarily the federal police is supposed to intervene, and the federal police is unable to intervene. And that will expose the weakness and the vulnerability of that state police. And that's why I said, whatever we do, we must continue to strengthen the federal police. I expect that with time, in the long run, the federal police will become leaner. And the leaner it becomes, perhaps the easier it will be for the federal government to be able to support them in terms of remuneration, in terms of equipment, in terms of have strong agencies in their jurisdiction. Gradually, federal police is expected to become leaner, but more effective and more mobile. So if we do it that way, then I don't expect any problem. They will be complementary, and the level of collaboration will be to the greater benefit of all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Mba. So there's another question here. I thought this question is quite important because this person, Ijeoma Sekalaye, and she's saying that often when we think about the police, we often think about them as playing a role in the protection of lives and property, which is their traditional remit. But also she's raising a point, which is that in Nigeria, the police play a critical role in elections, in election monitoring, in safeguarding election materials, and so on and so forth, preventing electoral violence. And she's asking, from your executive experience, what binding constitutional firewalls can we build into this bill right now to completely prevent state governors from weaponizing local police forces electoral and opposition intimidation? She's asking in regard to 2027, but I think we can extrapolate even beyond 2027 to all elections. Yes, we are coming. You can ask question if you.
No. Fear that Ijeoma is expressing is a fear a lot of people have expressed in different parts of the world. There are studies that have been carried out by scholars of comparative policing. In fact, Glaston, Professor Lemika of UniJOS, and so many other scholars have come up with this concept where they call the paradox or the enigma of policing, or the paradox or the enigma of the police, where they describe the police as an anomalous institution in a free and democratic society. Why do they describe the police as anomalous? They describe the police as an anomalous institution in a free and democratic society because the police has the capacity to be an enabler of freedom. The police have the capacity to protect and defend freedom. But incidentally, paradoxically, they also could become a disabler of freedom. In fact, constitutionally, we establish the police to defend freedom, protect democracy, protect civil liberty. But oftentimes, again, paradoxically, a lot of the work they do, from arrest to detention to search to restraining, all those things actually are directly an attack on freedom. So they attack freedom in order to defend freedom. And that's the kind of situation, that's the kind of fear Nigerians also have. How do we put structures in place to ensure that these police don't become a disservice to our democracy? How do we guarantee that the emerging state police services do not begin to play the role of thugs and begin to disrupt election rather than defending the democratic space? My suggestion will be simple. If you look at what we've done during elections in Nigeria, every time we have elections in Nigeria, the NPF will that all quasi-security agencies at the state level will not be allowed to participate in securing the electoral space.
Oh, okay.
So the Bubagu, the Hisba, the Latsma, the Trace in Ogun State, the Amoteco, all of them, none is allowed to participate in the policing of the electoral space. For me, most humbly, I will suggest we replicate that.
Okay.
If we can, we should ensure that for the beginning, state police are not allowed to police elections. Let it be essentially the job of the federal police, except where the federal police, for any reason, decide, maybe in an emergency, decide to call in the state police to join. We must, this is something we need to look at properly. And that's why, again, I said, as these reforms continue, we need to see more briefings, more communication from the federal government. What are your intentions? How do you want to drive? Those things that are giving the citizens a lot of concern, the government must continue to speak to it. And that's also a way of winning the citizens over, because trust is a big issue in policing. No matter how beautiful your intentions are in policing or within the policing ecosystem, as long as the citizens don't trust you, you will never succeed. And I'll give you a life example. While I was an assistant commissioner of police, I worked in Abia State. I worked in the state CID in Abia State. During my tour of duty, that was when the Operation Python Dance, or one of those operations, was going on. And the Nigerian military, in good conscience, decided to organize a medical outreach. The very day they announced that they were going to have a medical outreach, the state went crazy. A story came out that the medical outreach by the military was designed to was something else. They want to inject their children into something that will harm them. And parents were scrambling, going to the schools to go and collect their children. That was a big trust deficit, a big challenge associated with trust deficit. The intentions were beautiful. The plans have been put in, everything was beautiful. But just that trust deficit was created a big challenge for that medical outreach. And at the end of the day, I think that medical outreach did not take place. And so that's how it is in policing. That's how it is in most government operations. So it is important that the government continue to speak to us, continue to explain step by step what they are doing, and in order to have citizens buy in.
Thank you so much. We have a couple more questions. There's one question from, well, Ruth Ochanya Adio Moses. Says, what risks could arise from introducing state police, and how can they be mitigated? We've covered this earlier in the show, so we're not going to dwell on that. So let's give Bino YMD, an audience member, a chance to say to express his comments or ask his questions. Bino, are you there?
Yes, I'm with you, Prof. Can I go, please?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
I have a question and a brief comment.
Okay.
DIG, sir, I would like to ask, as we're talking about creating state police, my question is, do need, I mean, must all the states have state police, police service commission, and Ministry of Police Affairs as we have it at the federal level? I ask this, I am throwing up this question mindful of the fact that we already have an overbloated public sector, and most of these states are complaining of paucity of resources. Now, do we need to create all these agencies? You have a police force that can administer itself and run its affairs, and then you now have a police service commission and then the Ministry of Police Affairs. That's my question. So my comment, uh, I was part of a town hall recently that was organized by Arise News. It was on state police and national security. So issue that we thrown up at that town hall are the same issues you've thrown up tonight. A lot of people have expressed their fears about the possible abuse of state police, and many commentators are of the view that we shouldn't have any fear. After all, even the federal police itself and other security agencies that are under the control of the federal government are already being abused, especially when you look at what happened in Zakibian and the massacre in OD. So if they are already being abused, why are we now afraid that the state police will also be abused? So in that case, all we need to do is to put safeguards. I am actually fully in support of state police. All we have to do to put safeguards and then to enlighten the masses, enlighten the citizens, because they have to serve as the bulwark against abuse of state police, because whether we like it or not, the tendency to abuse it will always be there. So it is now up to the civil society, the media, opinion leaders, and the general public to talks so as to prevent us from abusing it. Secondly, my worry is that there will be some sort of lack of professionalism when it comes to the operation of state police, especially when you look at the fact that at the subnational level, there is no level of professionalism in the business of government as we see in the federal level, because we may likely end up with a situation whereby all kinds of people will be recruited into state police. You know, there will be nepotism, there will be favoritism, and all kinds of practices. And then we end up having the wrong people into the police force, which now end up giving us the wrong outcome, which is a national own goal. So whether we like it or not, this issue will be there. But however, I want to urge us as a nation that we all be vocal in speaking against lack of professionalism in state police. If we are all unanimous, if we are all pushing for professionalism, for high quality services, you know, for discipline in the running of the affairs of state police, I think we will achieve some result in getting a standard state police that is proactive, that is disciplined and professional in its conduct. So that's my take. Thank you very much. I rest my case.
Thank you. So Dr. Mba, if you don't mind, he had a particular question and you have a response. Well, let's take another comment from another audience member, since we are running out of time, and combine your answers. So the person who handled Naomi, I don't know. Yeah, can you unmute yourself? Let me unmute you so that you can make your comment or ask your question. Your hand is up, so please unmute yourself now. Unmute yourself. If not,
Prof, good evening, sir.
good evening. Yes, go ahead with your question.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mine is not a question.
Okay.
Mine is actually a comment I want to make.
Just keep it brief.
It's a good thing we are all positive and we are taking functionality of state police of the security situation we find ourselves, which is the primary reason why all Nigerians are pushing for state police. But I still maintain the fact that state police will be different a kind of a question to Dr. Mbasa. How will it be different with other agencies, governments, where today somebody talk about paucity of funds, not paid, salaries are not paid in some of these states. This police, you talked about the fact that it is the police we have actually come out from the same society, whatever community or whatever country, whatever people, the people we have are actually the kind of people that should actually work for us. So do you see the states, even if this governor, the NGF is pushing for state police in terms of security, are you leaving other agencies of government to now support this because there's a security problem? Are we not going to create another gap, another problem by either making this state police work well or just a conduit too? Because the state governors will not shift their attention from what they are supposed to do for every citizen and say they are only dwelling or they want to dwell more on the police, leaving other agencies of the same government, ministries, workers in the state and local government, and now say, okay, let's improve the police because we have security problem. So I think it's a question, and that is how I look at things going to work, except if these people are going to do something much better. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Dr. Mba, if you don't mind, may I ask you to respond to those those two comments? I think Bino had a particular question, and then we have one more question that we will run. Thank you, sir.
Yes. So, thank you, Prof. Bino made some very germane comments, and then do need to have state is for state commission, the rest of them. If you look at Chapter 7 of the 1963 Constitution, the Republican Constitution, specifically, I think Section 105, and create the subnational police structure under the Republican Constitution. Though it wasn't regional, a lot of people thought what we had then were regional police. They were actually local government police, because in the north you had the native authority police, and then in the southwest you had the local government police. So they were essentially local government police structures. But in the eastern region, they had none. They had none. They didn't have, and they relied essentially on the federal police. And those other two regions were not very, and that's an earlier point that there is no system of policing that is inherently better. It is actually what we make out of it that matters most. And so I also want to think, apart from the competition that state governors may want to have, it is not even, I don't expect that all this we have will the state policing thing at the same time. Some states might say, well, when now continues the federal police pending way, and that will be a gap. So I think it should be made because the capacity of this varies. Then I share your about fear of recruiting wrong people, political talks, compensatory recruitment, and all the rest. These are issues that we expect that those who are going to come up with the model laws for creation of state police and all that other regulatory oversight should be able to deal with. And when you talk of the tendency to abuse and then the tension between governors and state commissioners of police under the federal system. He has always been there. And I don't know whether you remember the case of Commissioner of Police in the old Anambra State, Commissioner of Police Bishop Eyitene, and the Anambra State governor then, the old Anambra State, which has now been broken to Enugu and Anambra, with some parts going to Jim Wodo, the governor then, had a running battle with the sitting commissioner of police, Bishop Eyitene. And Jim compiled the names of a certain number of police officers he wanted to be deployed to the government house, 64 of them. He didn't just say, Commissioner, I need 64 police officers. He actually compiled their names, their first numbers, and sent them to the governor and requested that the governor deploy these persons to the government house. And the governor looked at it and responded that, sir, if you want me to beef up the security at the government house, just tell me to do so, and I will go ahead to do so. But you don't have the powers to begin to micromanage my deployment. And that became a problem. The governor was enraged. He went to court. At the state level, the court ruled in his favor, and the police commissioner went on and said clearly that the governor lacks powers to give those kind of and we saw that tension, and but so these issues will always be there, and it's just for us as citizens to participate actively in these ongoing processes, hold our legislators accountable, and even after the laws has been made, continue to exercise civil oversight on the institutions to ensure that they serve
I think that's
covers it all.
Yeah, Dr. Mba. So, of time, we have two. We can only take this one. We've gone over it a little bit. So, last question, as from countries that have implemented state police, some of their
I don't know any. Okay, first of all, let me say, most state government, most decentralized policing system are actually federal systems of government. And so you have a decentralized the US, in Canada, in Australia, in India, and many other, Germany, I guess, and many other. And globally, the total number of countries practicing federalism, I don't think they are out of over 200 countries who are members of the UN. I don't even thereabout 200 or thereabout. I don't think you have more than 20 that are actually practicing the federal system of government. So, and in Africa, the only country I know that practices federalism is Nigeria. So, actually, from my research, I don't know any other state in Africa that actually have a decentralized system of policing like the way we have it. But that doesn't mean that centralized government, unitary states don't have decentralized policing. So some unitary states actually have decentralized policing system. England is a unitary state, but it doesn't have a kind of decentralized policing system, but a very strong national oversight by the Home Office. And so, but in Africa, I don't have any country I can point to for now. So, Taiwo,
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Mba. You have given us a lot to think about. We just are so grateful to you for coming on the show and giving us a lot to contemplate over the next few weeks as this issue remains on the front burner of our national conversation. One of the things that has stuck with me from your comments is your remark about, dealing with the socioeconomic factors that drive crime, and that if we don't deal with that, no matter what we do, no matter how the reform is structured or policing is structured, it will remain ineffective. Dealing with unemployment, dealing with school children, dealing with the issue of economic exclusion. If we don't deal with those issues, I think that's just profound, and it has stuck with me. Another issue that you mentioned that I hadn't even thought about at all, in addition to your very apt observation, also be considered as part of that equation, is even uneven and unequal policing because of the differing financial states. So having talked about that might not just create uneven policing, but also lead to uneven crime levels as criminals begin to scope out weak points and begin to move to states that they perceive to not have adequate policing. So that is something that hasn't featured, as far as I know, in the conversations. So thank you so much for alerting us to a lot of these issues. I made a lot of notes as we were speaking. I'll go back to these notes. I'm sure as this conversation continues, bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. Dr. Agbo, last words for Dr. Mba, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mo. I think you've made all the points. I think we touched on all the choke points in this argument, whether it's for or against state policing in Nigeria. One good take home for me is what Dr. Mba talked about, the fact that we want to make it to be. If you look at Nigeria today, the problem we have is not because we don't have the proper law or legal. The issue has always been on if we have the will to, because human beings are basically who they are. They look for a way out if you give them that option. Nigeria, constitutional wise, we started with parliamentary democracy of the Westminster type. At the end of the day, it ended in the Nigerian Civil War of 1966. By 1979, we changed to the American presidential system, and we call ourselves a federal republic. But we still operate like a unitary, where the center is so strong and the individual units are very, very weak, even though we still call it a presidential federal system. So again, at the end of the day, it's the way we make it. So I'll just say that the taste of the pudding is going to be in the eating. Let's hope that our political leaders will have the willpower to implement these things and give it the back it up with the necessary legislation that will actually make it work. And then, of course, for us, the rest of us Nigerians, being able to put these people's feet on fire, because at the end of the day, I think even the issue of state policing came about from the clamoring, because I think everybody will agree with that, the fact that the number one problem in Nigeria today, ranking above poverty, ranking above every social, political, economic, is insecurity. So it's pervasive, and I think that if the government, then if we're able to get a hold on insecurity, then Nigeria will be one step further to solving what has become a ginormous problem for every one of us. Again, I thank our audience for making our time to come and ask some of those incisive questions, and we thank Dr. Mba for You know, I used to watch when he was, I think, the first PRO, you know, how he makes all those media appearances and, you know, in his well-starched, you know, camouflage. So, thank you so much again for your service. And we hope to engage you in no distant time in the conversation about how to move our country forward. Thank you so much, Mo.
Yeah. On that note, I'm glad to even say that because our audience is full of appreciation for your appearance on the show and for all the wonderful points you've made. Taiwa Jala says, given the topical nature of this issue, I think it justifies bringing Dr. Mba back in the future for another session. So echoing what, so maybe if Dr. Mba has time in the future as this issue unfolds, we can invite him back. Professor Sadiq Abdullah, he says, Dr. Mba, thank you. As a social science teacher and global education professor, I hope that the FG, the federal government, will assist the states in getting this topic into the civic education in primary and secondary schools. Zaomi says, thank you, Dr. Mba, for leading this conversation, and so on and so forth. Our audience are just full of appreciation for your appearance and for coming to give us the Canadian Mounted Police Force. So this person is associated with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Force. Is thanking you for all the insights. And for the record, I want to say supports state police, but in a qualified and conditional way. His support for it is conditional and qualified. Thank you very much, the audience, for joining us, and have a good evening, have a good day, wherever you are.
Thank you so much. Good night. Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you and good night.
Good night.